Okay, it's time to do another Patreon album. This one is for Mark Monforti, and I really hope I got your name right there. This one's an interesting one as it's a live recording of such. Well, let's just get into it. Let's just talk about it.
Converts come together. We're gathered, let's begin. We'll swear our oaths forever.
7/13/19 live at Monforti Manor from Valerie, Gracia, Steve, Unruh, and Phideaux, Xavier. So this one is, as I mentioned, it's a live recording kind of from like a home studio, and in that respects it's a very intimate performance, and the album itself is broken up into two parts. We have Steve Unruh, I think that's his last name, apologies if it's not, and Steve is this is kind of like his solo work, his own work that he's been doing, and Fido comes in and helps out a little bit within the bass work. And then the second half is Fido's live performance, and kind of like an acoustic set of his work. His stuff tends to be a little bit more on the grandiose, very layered, symphonic soundscapes. And both of these sets have that very intimate, very personal feel. Like it feels like you're connected very personally with these performances. Now, obviously, because I am very familiar with Fido's back catalog, I kind of liked his stuff a little bit more, but that's what I'm coming with. So let's talk a little bit about Steve's work, because Steve's work is still quite nice. We've got about 7 tracks. They're okay. They're okay. I mean, it's perked my interest enough to make me want to dive in a little bit deeper and find out more of his music. My favorite track is actually the last one of Luxury Denial. This one had me closing my eyes and really kind of headbanging with my fists kind of in the air, just like really getting into. I love the buildup of this track. It's about 11 minutes long. And the thing that I love about it is, even though it's very like subdued and stripped back in terms of like there's no electrical guitars, there's no overlays of synthesizer or anything like that, there's still this raw energy that's felt within it. And I can't help but when we get to that final refrain of that main theme, it just really bites into me. I know a lot of people don't like the whole singing style where it's just ba da ba 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 ba, but I really do. Like, I like that kind of inflection. I like that boppy attitude when it's used properly. Like, obviously sometimes they can be like a placeholder for something better, but sometimes you also just need a little bit of a ba. Like, it's a technique that when overused is bad, as you would for anything that's overused, but in terms of its own thing, I think it was really well used. And I think we should also talk about the long track, the Two Little Awakenings at 18 minutes. I feel like this song is a little bit overblown. I think it's a little bit too long. I felt like the big ending didn't really justify the length of the track. It was still good and I still enjoyed it, and I like the narrative flow and the journey that we go on, but I just was never as invested into it as Luxury Denial. And I also kind of enjoyed the second track of Twilight in India. It's got a really nice groove and it's got a little bit of that Eastern inflection on it just to kind of set the stage a little bit. And I like how dark it is, even though it's an acoustic set. And another track of the Lawn Chair song almost feels like a Jethro Tull. And that's not necessarily just because of the flutes that we found within this track, but just kind of the driving force. The rhythm section is very akin to an Ian Anderson rhythm that we would have on a Jethro Tull track. And I like the dual track that we have on here, and I think it was very smart that he paired Rega Focus with Something in Heaven Bleeds. Rega Focus is this darker fiddle-led, darker overtone jam, but we've got this narrative that's right in the center of this track, and it's almost like a beat poem that we have. It's good. I mean, we have a little bit for Learn to Love Rain, where there's a little bit of a spoken word aspect to it, and very like overly pretentious prose that we have on there, and then it's fine. But what I really like is how that bleeds right into Something in Heaven, or Something in Heaven Bleeds. I really like how those two blend into one another, because Something in Heaven Bleeds follows that darker beat section that we had within Rega Focus, and it carries it through. So I believe that brings us into disc 2, which is the Phideaux set, and I loved this set. I loved hearing a lot of his tracks pared down substantially, and not all of his tracks are necessarily huge get up and go symphonic blasts of like interplay of polyphonic sounds, but they do generally run a little bit higher on the production value. That's not to say that the production value on this is less. Like, I think the production value on this was top notch and really, really well done, and it captured, I believe, the spirit of what was going on in this particular evening. But what I really like is some of the workings of this track and how they were rejigged. Like, for example, The Error Lives On is the one that starts this album, and it's a reworking of the second and last track from his Infernal album. It's what ties the album together as bookmarks, and I feel like it was a really, really good job of blending those two tracks together in this much more acoustic set. I also really, really like the acoustic version of One Star. One Star being a little bit more of a power electric song. This one being much more strapped down is much more tangible, and I really like the inflections that we have on it. I feel like it really adds something fun and new to the track that wasn't there in the original pressing. Same with You and Me Against a World of Pain. Again, it's a little bit more electrical in the studio, but here in this setting, it's got this new approach that makes it much more tangible, and it feels much more realized in that sense. It provides such a beautiful environment for this song to really bloom into. Now, one that was already a little bit more on the subdued acoustical set is Candy Brain, one of my favorite tracks from Doomsday Afternoon. And it really works well here because it's even more menacing. It's even more dark in this new setting that we have here. This feels much more like they're just sitting around a campfire and really telling you the story and inviting you in. And it's very intoxicating in that sense. And the same could be said about the second last track of Doctrine of Eternal Ice. Again, another brilliant track from Doomsday Afternoon. But again, it's bleeding in this new oomph. Like, we don't have those overlays of harmonizations that we did in the studio recording, but what we do have is Phideaux and Valerie's singing styles and harmonizations between the two of them really providing something beautiful. And speaking of Valerie, her rendition of Infinite Supply, which in the studio was done by Phideaux, but here is done by Valerie, and it is just gorgeous. Like, I found myself weeping when I was listening to this because, like, I mean, Infinite Supply being the closing track from Phideaux's 7 album, this one just heart-wrenchingly destroyed me in the best way. Like, I found myself inconsolable when I listened to this. And I'm so glad that this was the final track off of the album. I could not stop myself from just being overly emotional. And it really, really shows the talent of not only the songwriting when these songs still sound so good when there's so few musicians to orchestrate them. The core of the tracks are that good that they're still able to stand alone throughout this whole thing. Tying all this together, this album was a definite treat. This was one that I particularly loved, and I would have absolutely no problem picking this up in physical format. This is one that I would revisit, and if this is kind of the standard live album from Phideaux, I would not be disappointed. And the stuff from Steve was fine. I still love Luxury Denial, but the rest of the tracks were good. Sorry, I didn't have more to say about that one. I just found myself gushing a little bit more on Phideaux's set. So yeah, that's about it. That's it for 7/13/19, which I believe is the date that they sat down and recorded this. From Valerie, Steve, and Phideaux. What did you guys think? You can. I've left the link down below to the store if you wanted to pick this bad boy up. Mark said that this was one of the reasons why he wanted to showcase this. So If you want to pick this up in physical format, which is the rating that I gave it, there's a link down below to do so. I don't know if this will be ever available for streaming. I hope it will be, because I feel like the music that's found on this begs to be listened to. So yeah, that's about it. What did you guys think? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.